Hi guys, we're going to make this gnome card today, and I wanted to show you how to put this together because it's not necessarily self-explanatory. There's a lot of little details in here and how I did the letters and whatnot, so I want to show you how I did that, plus show you how I colored this and why I did the layout the way that I chose to do it. So I hope you'll stick around and color along with me. So one of the first things I'm going to do is glue my letters together. So while I'm coloring, they can dry a little bit. And I really recommend a fine-tipped new glue bottle to do this. And I'm going to put a little bit of glue on the back of my letter. And then this is the one that is the pattern paper. And then I'm going to layer that offset just a smidgen from my black, like so. This way that's going to help that blue pop off the paper a little bit more. So I'll just set that up there to dry, and I'm going to add some glue to my A. So I'm just putting a tiny bit of glue on the back, and then I'm going to go ahead and offset this one as well. But this gives this glue a time to set up before we start adding any foam tape onto the back of any of these. There we go. So we'll let Happy dry. And while it's drying, we're going to go ahead and color up our gnome. And you might have to cut this piece down to 4 by 5 1/4 so it'll mat on your black. I always like to start with the skin tone. So I'm going to start with E11, E00, and E000. And E11 has a little bit of pink in it. So I like that because it makes his cheeks look a little bit rosy and the inside of his ears a little bit rosy. And then we can blend that out with E double O. Push that forward. And start getting his hands, the bottom of his hands here a little bit. And then we will continue to blend that out with E triple O. Now the good news is this guy, I think he's very easy to color. He doesn't have any little tricks in him. He's very straightforward, which is nice. Sometimes it's nice to just color something easier. Now if you want, you can go back in with your E11 and add a little bit more if you want his cheeks to be a little rosier, or you can go back in with a darker color like R20 would be a good one. I'm just going to smooth that out just a little bit. I'm pretty happy with that. So now we can put our skin tones away. Okay, for his hat, I'm going to use G46, G43, and G40. I'm going to move this paper out of the way here. And from the sides, what I'm going to do is I'm going to flick in my G46 because I want the hat to look like it's rounded. So this is going to push the sides of the hat back just a little bit, giving it that rounded look. I'm going to come in with my G43, pushing that in. Now, if you've ever used these colors, you know that they take a little bit to blend, so don't be afraid to go back over this twice if you need to. I think I'm going to need to. And then this is again G40, so we're just flicking and pushing that color in towards the center. And I'm going to go back in a little bit with my G46 and darken up this bottom part of the hat because I feel like I pushed all that color out. And that's also going to help smooth out this hat a little bit. These colors are a little bit tricky to blend. And with that centerpiece, and we're going to call that a nice little blended hat. Now I did get a tiny bit of green in his forehead, so what I can do to fix that is go back to my E000 and I can dab that, and that's going to push that green back up a little bit. And I'm just going to leave it out if I need to come back and do it again, but I think that's going to be fine. All right, and while I have these greens out, we're not going to forget to do this little pot over here. I think I've decided there's 2 kinds of leaves in here. So these leaves, the longer ones, I'm going to do my G46. and G43. I might even just, I don't know, let's see. You might not need your G40 here, but I think right here on the little tip, I might put a little bit of G40. Excuse me. So just a tiny bit of G40 on the edge of it. And I'm going to do those other leaves in a different green. For his beard, I'm going to get out C3, C1, and C0. And I'm going to actually start with my midtone, my C1. And I'm going to kind of, in the shape of his beard, start putting in these like flicks that come from the bottom of the beard from the into the top. We don't want to go this way. That's bad. We want to go in the direction that the hair grows. And I'm just going to put in a few of those C1s. And the reason I do this is because C1 is really light. And if there's something I don't like, I can probably blend it out and not, and get rid of it. Where if I do this with C3, it is definitely harder to blend out. So I'm going to only put in a tiny bit of C3, just little flicks down from his face towards the bottom and up, and kind of copying a little bit those lines that I put in with C1, but definitely not as many. Now I can go back in with C1 and go over these, and it's going to just blend them out just a little bit. I go back and forth. Sometimes I like my beards to be really like hairy, and I don't like to blend them out. And then sometimes I like to go back in and just blend them out a little bit. And then the C0, if you want, you can go back in, and any part that still remains to be white, if you want to put C0, it's just going to tone it down a little bit so it's not so in your face. But I think there we go. We've got a nice looking beard. And while we have these colors out, I'm also going to do my flowers white. I want these two images to complement each other. So this I'm going to do a little different. Normally I would put the dark around the center of the flower, but in this case, I'm just going to put them at the bottom of the flower. I think this gives this a more whimsical look, which goes better with our gnome. So that was a little bit of C3, and now I'm just blending out with C1. And these colors blend very easily, so I can work all my flowers together. If you're new to coloring, I recommend you break them up, do 2 and 2, and this way your alcohol doesn't evaporate on you. And then this is C1, and I'm just blending that back up into the white. So we have white flowers with this gray shadow. And again, it's just more or less a different look, but I think that works really well for these guys. And in the darkest parts of his shirt, or where I imagine it to be the darkest parts, I'm going to put R29. Then I'm going to come back in with my R24, and I'm going to start pushing R29 down towards the center of his belly. And I imagine his belly, he looks like he's got a big belly, is stretched out a little bit. So his shirt, I imagine, would be a little lighter because it's stretched over his little gnome belly. And then I'm going to use R14, which is the lightest of the reds, to finish up coloring this. It's the highlight. And now while we have these reds out, I'm going to come over here and do these berries. And I didn't think they were big enough to do any shading in them. But what I'm going to do is go through and do some is R29. I'm going to do some is R24 and do some is R14. And I am trying to be as random as possible. I don't want there to be a pattern or making sure I got them all. So there we go. So that added some variation without having to do any extraordinary blending. For his pants, I'm using B97 B95 and 93. And in that same fashion here, I'm going to put the darkest colors in those spots there because that's where I imagine them to be the darkest. And then I'm going to start blending them out going down. This is B95. If you can hear the little one in the background, I apologize. I've been trying to make this video for days, but to find time when they're all quiet is impossible in our house, I feel like. So I decided to do this with him playing with trucks at my feet. Right, for his boots, I decided to do E18. And I did this because it has I think the E18, E17, E15, they have just a tiny bit of red in them. And this way, I thought that pulled in the red from his shirt. Kind of looks a little bit like a leather color. And his boots are so small that you can get away with just doing 2 colors. So I used E18 and E15 to do his boots. Now, to pull this color over here onto this side, I'm going to do the flower pot. Now, the flower pot, as you notice, is cut off. There's a reason for this. This was actually a giant flower pot. I masked off, when I stamped this, the bottom part so that it looks like, I wanted him to be the star of the show, not the flower pot, and it was huge. So that was my way of kind of toning down the flower pot, was to kind of cut it off. But we're going to kind of draw in this little imaginary line here. Not imaginary, I guess it is a real line. That's where the flower pot stops. So we're not going to see the bottom. It's just a real small pot here. And I promise it'll all come together in the end. Oops, that's the wrong side. So I'm using here E18, E15, and E13. And I'm going to get the top of my flower pot here. Don't forget that part. I might have to come in here with some E17. I want this to blend out a little better. In with my my W3. Yes, Declan. And I'm going to ground my image here, and then I'm going to slowly fade this out a little bit. And this is going to be where the happy is going to sit, is on this ledge here that we're kind of creating. And then in with W0. There we go. Oh, I realized just now that I forgot to color his suspenders. So I'm just going to come in with E15. And I'm just doing this for continuity. I don't want to introduce a new color, and we don't need to shade. So just putting a tiny bit of E15 there to get his suspenders colored. So we have his little buckles here, which we're going to do in Y15. And we're just going to add a pop of yellow. And while we got that out, we're going to put a little bit of Y15 here in the bottom of the center of the flowers. And I like to take just a tiny bit of Y11 and kind of just dab that so it softens it at the top. And now we've got some cute little, I actually think they look a little bit like fried eggs. Do they look like eggs? I don't know, but they're still cute little flowers. I love them. All right, and last but not least, we have this other shape of leaf here. All right, to accomplish that, I wanted to go with a little bit of a springier green. So I went YG17. And at the base of the leaf, I'm just putting a little bit of YG17. And I'm going to blend that out with my YG13. Now, 13 and 17 are very similar, but I do think you need them as a bridge to get to that YG11. So I'm just putting a little bit there, and then with my YG11, I'm going to go and push that color out towards the tips. Now, they're in the same, you know, general color group. They're not that different. So if you didn't have one of these, or, you know, you don't have only one shade of green, don't worry about it. Just do all your leaves in the same shade of green. I don't think it was a huge difference in the end, but I had the colors, so I used them. And there we go. So we have one more little thing to do before we go on to gluing our happy down. And I'm going to come in with W3, and I forgot to do this when I had them out the first time. I'm going to just go in and fill in these gaps of white, because these are behind and in the bouquet of flowers. I think they're actually distracting those pops of white when we have everything else colored. So I'm just adding a little bit of W3 as a shadow in there to kind of pull that whole bouquet together, because I don't know, those little pops of white were bugging me. So I just kind of closed them up and pushed them to the back. All right, the coloring is done, so that's absolutely awesome. So now all we have to do is put our happy and assemble our card. I found these really thin foam strips on Amazon. I can put a link to them. I don't know the measurements off the top of my head, but they're really, really thin. And if you remove both sides of the release paper, they're also very flexible. So what I found was I could bend and twist these, although the H I don't need to bend, but they cut super easy. And I'm able to back my letters. Now, one thing I just realized is I probably should lay my letters out before I put them all, make them all gluey, so I have some idea of where to put them. So let's do that with the other letters here. I knew I wanted the Y to kind of be near his hand. And I also want them to be lower than the sentiment. And also on our gray grounding. And they are going to cover up some of those flowers. Now remember, we want our gnome to be the star of the show, not the flowers. They're kind of there just to create a little bit of balance. I think I'm going to slide my Y over just a smidgen under that hand. I wasn't sure how far I wanted to go, but I'm glad I laid that out, because I don't want to cover up all my flowers. So now I can put my H down, and there we go. We've got our H done. So now let's come in and we can add some foam tape to the back of our A. Very nice. Let's give those a good push down. And then the next part of this card is just assembly, the glue part. And this is fairly easy to do. You just glue this on. Now you can trim your white paper a little bit if you need to have it fit on your black cardstock. I did do that. I wish I had left it a little bigger. I feel like that's a lot of black, but that's okay. Actually, it looks very nice. So I trimmed it to 4 and 5 1/4, and I cut the happy letters out of here to save some paper. I thought that was a clever solution, and as long as you don't get too close to the edge, no one will ever know that that's back there, just you and me. And there we go. Now we have our gnome card all finished and done. I hope that helped you guys understand how to put that together. I hope you guys enjoyed that. And happy coloring, guys. I'll see you guys on the next video.